Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Geoff Turner, who is founder and CEO of Choptank, and Prasad Gollapalli, who is founder and CEO of Trucker Tools. And today we're going to talk about the micro carrier challenge, building a reliable and sustainable capacity network. You know, one of the big takeaways from 2018 was that finding trucking capacity during periods of high demand is very challenging. Especially, when, in a highly fragmented, trucking market where you have, hundreds of thousands of single truck owner operators and, micro carriers with 9 or fewer trucks. So, I mean, how do you efficiently, tap into this large source of capacity? How do you make it a win-win-win, proposition for shippers, carriers, and brokers? And what is the role of technology in helping to build a reliable and sustainable, capacity network? Well, those are the main questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to have Geoff and Prasad on the program to share their insights and advice on this topic. So Geoff, Prasad, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Adrian. Thanks for having me. Prasad, thanks for joining me in this. Excited to be here and share some of the knowledge that we've built over the years on how we utilize smaller carriers and how important they are to the freight economy, and I'm excited to be able to discuss some of that today.
Great.
Thank you, Adrian and Geoff, for joining today. I'm excited for our conversation.
Great. Well, Geoff, I'm going to start with you. Some folks may be familiar with Choptank, some folks may not. So just to kind of provide a little bit of context, why don't you briefly tell us a little bit about, Choptank and your operations there?
Yeah, that'd be great. So we're about a 20-year-old company. When I got out of college, I started working in the poultry industry. And the unique thing about the poultry industry is it's not real fun, for starters, but it's an industry where we rely on a lot of carriers who are small, because traditionally in the poultry business years ago, most of the poultry was shipped what they would call wet, right? So that meant it was ice packed. So those loads would be, there would always be a lot of water that runs at them. So they a lot of times they weren't optimal freight for the larger carriers. They didn't like their trailers to become chicken stinky, they would say, or something like that. So as I evolved in that poultry business, at the end of my career there, I was running one of their warehouse operations, and I got to know a lot of carriers. And the interesting thing I found when I was there was most of the carriers we were using, 5 trucks, owner operators, just really small carriers. And the unique thing is that most of them didn't mind that their trailers got dirty, because they would get back to their house and wash them out themselves. So where am I going with that? The bigger thing is as we've grown Choptank, we're primarily in the perishable business. We still do a lot of poultry, we do a lot of produce, we do a lot of foodstuffs. And what we've learned is that the smaller carriers, especially in the reefer side, are really, really important. A lot of those guys will do the things that the large carriers won't. They'll go to the places that large carriers won't, and they'll offer a level of service that is just differentiated from their ability to sort of be more in control of the truck or the load. So Choptank ourselves, we handle about 150,000 loads a year. We're based in Maryland, got about 5 other offices around the country. Primarily in the perishable space. So again, have a high reliance on these small carriers, and certainly respect the importance that they have in the freight space.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, I think you got into a little bit of what was going to be my first question. So it sounds like these micro carriers obviously play an important role in your business. I mean, why are they important to serving the capacity needs of your clients, particularly like when coming out of a year like 2018, where it was such a challenging year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the great thing about the small carriers is that most of the time they're really adaptable. And especially in the food space, we often see, loads that have multiple drops, and a lot of times the drops aren't even dictated until maybe the day before. So we find that, like a large carrier, for example, like if all of a sudden the day before you tell them that, hey, it's not going to end up in Boston, it's going to end up in Portland, Maine now, right? They're going to, oh, we're not going to do that. But traditionally, your smaller carriers are more than capable and happy to do that kind of stuff, and are more adaptable. So we find that those guys tend to be easier to work with. And as you say, when capacity gets tight, the shippers primarily are not really concerned whether the guy's one truck or 100 trucks. They need that capacity, and we have access to those guys. They typically don't have sales forces, and they rely on organizations like Choptank to help keep them loaded.
All right, great. Yeah. I mean, Geoff did a nice job about, kind of describing a little bit about the differences between, micro carriers and large carriers as they relate to his business. I mean, Prasad, you work with a lot of different, brokers and other companies and different, you have different perspective of the market in terms overall from working with carriers. I mean, what do you see as some of the differentiating, qualities between, the micro carriers and the large carriers out there?
Yeah, definitely, Geoff did a good job of emphasizing on the need of these small carriers. As you know, there are hundreds of thousands of these small carriers out there. If you leave the number alone, the top 2% or the top carriers have a very small percentage of the capacity. So I believe it's in low single digits. So that shows the strength is in the numbers. Another stat is about 80% of the truckloads are being moved by these small carriers and owner operators. So in their number, they're doing a bulk of the work. Now, the recent trend that we have seen is that most of the asset-based carriers are moving their own assets towards dedicated runs and leaving the non-dedicated runs open for the small carriers. So there is an emphasis on, there is a much more need of these small carriers in the market for us. So now, as Geoff said about one of the examples earlier, if you look at the small carriers, they take freight that nobody wants to take sometimes. So in end of December, if you have a load going into Florida, nobody wants to take it, but a small carrier would take that. And so they're truly the shock absorbers of our market because they are handling the imbalances in freight. And when we have additional freight, guess who we rely on? The small carriers. Or when there is less freight, then the first people that gets, chopped, we don't want that, but these are the small carriers, right? So they are the ones that play an important role. In my viewpoint, they are the true heroes of our transportation.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think part of the challenge has been, historically, is tapping into this, segment of the market, right? Because of, I work with a lot of shippers, for example. I mean, a lot of them work with, maybe 60 carriers, maybe 100 carriers. But when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of carriers, right, plugging into, trying to create connections, finding them, connecting with them, being able to manage them, it's just not something that they can do cost effectively or efficiently. I mean, obviously, that's the role that a lot of brokers play in the market, is being able to bring that broader market or that broader capacity to shippers. Geoff, going back to you now. I mean, you often hear shippers talking about, particularly last year when things get tight, of them wanting to be shippers of choice, right? Mm-hmm. We've done programs here on Talking Logistics talking about that. I assume that brokers want to be viewed as brokers of choice in the eyes of carriers too. Mm-hmm. I mean, what does being a quote unquote broker of choice mean? And, how do you become one, and, kind of what actions are required?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I go back to a little bit what Prasad said, that, when we talk about carriers that, the small carriers are the only ones that'll go to Florida and things like that. I think that's sort of what we talk about with shippers, is the fact that, the larger carriers really want to optimize their network. So, they want to make sure that the freight matches up with another customer or whatever. And the ability for those small carriers to have access to some of that freight is very, very important. And from an ease of doing business, I think what we try to do with our carriers is we really try to be as carrier centric as possible, because we feel like that really is a win-win that goes back to the shipper, especially in a sense of when we start talking about this whole push for tracking and knowing where trucks are and things like that. We've had a lot of success getting carriers to utilize, the apps and things so we know where they are. And that sort of is one of our ways to be, reward our carriers that want to do that. Because number one, it's going to give them access to freight that they wouldn't otherwise have, meaning, to your point on, a large shipper that's using 100 carriers, that small carrier is not going to be able to get that business. But when we as a third party can really offer them the same suite of services that a large motor carrier can, especially from visibility and things like that, that's going to give those small carriers a real leg up to have opportunities at the same freight that the big guys have. So the bigger piece of that is, as we've become more carrier centric and the carriers have started to adapt being tracked and helping us optimize their networks, that just feeds back to be a broker of choice. And then really it makes us more of a real partner to those larger shippers that need that extra capacity.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, as I mentioned in my opening remark, it's really finding those win-win-win, value proposition, right? And I think when I think you just illustrated that in terms of, the value propositions for carriers to come on board in terms of moving up the maturity curve when it comes to, some of the technologies that are available out there to be able to provide that visibility that shippers are looking for and so forth. So they're able to get, some of that additional business that they may be missing out on because of not being able to provide that directly, themselves. And then obviously from a shipper standpoint, being able to not only get that data and that visibility, that information, but being able to tap into this source of capacity that, they couldn't get it, themselves. Right.
Right.
So Prasad, I mean, we Geoff talked a little bit about, apps and technology there. So let's talk about technology now, particularly as it relates to micro carriers. I mean, I think there's a perception out in the market that these small carriers are averse to, technology. I mean, it's number one, is that true? And, when you talk to these carriers, I mean, what capabilities or requirements are most important to them?
That's actually not true that these carriers don't adapt to technology. Contrary to that, most of the small carriers adapt to technology far more than other segments of the market. There was a study done a couple of years back that put the owner-operators or the small carriers adopting to smartphones over 98%. So today we are probably standing close to 100%. Right? Not just them having the smartphones, how they use that. Right? They use those phones for work, primarily, to optimize their work, to communicate with their carrier, with their brokers or 3PLs or shippers. So they're using it primarily for business. Most of the people have a tendency to use up to 7 apps a day, right? So what this segment is facing today is a lot of issues such as, app overload. So everybody's got an app for that. We have an app for that, right? Why don't you download this app and it does a small thing? And then there is another app that does a small thing. And there is another app that does this. Before we know it, too many apps on these phones. I'm not making this up. I Googled it. There is a website that talks about therapy for app overload. So today we have something like that. Now, owner-operators being so fragmented, they rely on technology on the road. And the smartphone is the perfect technology that they can depend on. And what they were looking for is, when we asked our carriers, this is what they've said. They don't want too many apps. They want an app or a handful of apps that does everything for them. So they're not jumping between apps. The jumping between apps is very inefficient for them. They want apps or technology per se, that is more third-party approach rather than owned by a particular company. So today, kudos to Geoff. Geoff has always been a pioneer in adopting to technology with their organization. Companies like him could go out and build their own app, but they choose to actually adopt to a third party. And the real rationale behind that is they see more value in putting the responsibility on a third party, build an app and improve that app. So that frees up, per se, if you're a broker or a carrier too, for that matter, right? What you're doing is you get the opportunity to get the best of the best that is available in the market rather than get tied up. Right? Then they also see technology, these carriers, these micro carriers, see technology as a means of transparency. So, think about it. Technology can really help a carrier find out what's happening at a shipper location. They can just Google a shipper location. They can see the comments there. They can look at real-time traffic. That's transparency. As a broker, they can see where the truck is. That's transparency. Above all, the thing that binds the carriers and the brokers together, rates can be exchanged right there. So there is a lot of this transparency that can, that comes to the table with technology. So technology plays a very important role. Now, in addition to this, what these carriers are looking for is how can these apps or technology solve problems with parking. Parking is a big, big pain for everyone. I know there is no one single solution, but they would like to be able to find a solution for that. And the biggest and even more important thing is detention. So, when we spoke to our carriers, the biggest thing that they said was they know that detention can be totally eliminated. There are going to be shippers that are going to have the detention. So they would like some sort of a technology solution that would help them or help them manage their time at a shipper's location. So for that matter, what we do is we kind of tie the visibility into detention. So when a driver arrives at a particular stop, we alert our broker saying that the driver has arrived, has been waiting for so long. So we're helping the broker be part of that conversation with the shipper on behalf of the carrier. That builds trust. And these things we can do with technology rather than just picking up the phone and calling people, right? And at the end of the day, these smartphones are the backbone or the underlying technology for this completely fragmented segment of small carriers.
It's amazing. The amount of computing power that we all carry in our pockets, today with iPhones or Samsungs and so forth. And you're right. I think, when you look at, from an application, standpoint, I think it follows, what you're seeing on the shipper side, right? They're looking for, let's say, TMS solutions that are able to, do more and more, handle more and more of their operations in a single solution. Versus having to open 3 or 4 different applications to, handle their private fleet or handle their parcel or handle their outbound or handle their inbound. They want a TMS solution that handles, their operations broadly. And so it makes perfect sense to me that carriers would kind of want the similar type of thing where they wouldn't want to open, 10 different apps, to get their job done, a daily job done, to find loads, to find information about detention and parking spots and execute, find a load and so forth. That, the more that they can do within the single application, the more efficient, they will be, throughout their day. So that brings me back to you. Geoff, talking about technology now, what role does technology, play in your operations? And, how are you working with trucker tools and your carriers along those lines? And kind of at the end of the day, what kind of benefits are you achieving?
So great question. I wanted to just tack on something to what Prasad said, is that these micro carriers are very interesting because they're all really, really smart people and companies, meaning that they know rates really well, they know markets really well, and most importantly, they like to have choices, and to think about having a carrier that is going to be captive to one company's app and say, okay, I'm only going to haul for XYZ broker or ABC broker. These carriers are smart, and they want to make sure that whatever rates they're getting paid are within market, and they like to see different opportunities. So I think, at the end of the day, I don't think we ever give enough credit to how good business people these carriers are, because and that sort of fits into the bigger how technology works into giving these carriers options, and that's real important. That's real important to them. In the technology realm here at Choptank, we've always seen such ability to continue to enhance the transaction, especially in what we do, being a lot of perishables. There is, so many exceptions that we have to deal with whether that be temperature or lumpers or pallets or weather in a field for the whatever, or a food manufacturing facility shuts down, or we're dealing with a lot of exceptions. So what we've tried to do is try to figure out how we can streamline what we can, so that our folks are able to better satisfy the needs of our customers on those things that we really most of the time can't control. So one great example is the check call process. That for perpetuity has always been such a manual process, and especially in the perishable space, it's really important we know where things are when the shelf life might be 3 or 4 days, right? So that part of the process of having to call a driver every couple hours and figure out where he is, that's a really time-consuming process, expensive. So by utilizing technology, especially smartphone technology, we're able to know where these drivers are in increments that the carriers are comfortable with, so that we don't have to bother them while they're on the road, and it builds that trust from the carrier side that we're not gonna be worried about where they are all the time, because we're getting that information. So the more that we're able to just have the information that should be more standard, and we try to make that efficient, then our folks can be more adapt to handle these unique needs of our customers that honestly, there's probably not a lot of technology that can solve some of the things that we have to deal with. So it's just going to make us better on that end and make us more efficient, so that we can continue to offer a lot of value to our shippers.
One of the things I often hear about, from a lot of brokers in particular, is, leveraging this technology. Number one is, about the relationship with carriers in terms of, like you just gave the great example that with check calls, right? I mean, that is a very manual process, and it's not efficient for you, and it's not efficient for the drivers and the carriers themselves. But it's also from a business standpoint, in order for you to grow your operations, technology such as this enables you to grow without having to add, a ton of people, because the more, if you're still relying on manual check calls or manual processes to do things, as you grow your business, that implies you got to add more and more people, which is not a scalable model, right?
That's so much so, especially with everybody's got the labor pressures everywhere, and you can't really escape that right now. So again, the more that these just standard everyday things that we can add some technology to. Another great example is the ability, especially in the food business. You guys know there's always 2 or 3 cases are damaged here and there all the time, and we get a lot of that. And through the smartphone technology, we're able to have the driver take pictures of the product right there on the truck. That flows right back into our TMS. We're able to quickly get that to the shipper and usually get all that stuff resolved right then and there. Whereas in the past, that would have been the pictures might have came in later on, and you got a claims person that's got to get involved and sort of sort all this out. In the meantime, the customer's probably not paying us, the carrier's not getting paid, and there's just so many things going. So just by that little piece of technology that we're able to bolt on there, we're able to just make that experience that much better for the carrier and the customer. And the more we can weed out that stuff that's just not part of what we should be good at, it's just going to make, it's a win-win. As you said, it's a win, it's a win, it's a win. It's all the way across. Everybody's benefiting from that technology.
Yeah, no, great examples there. And, Prasad, just to kind of build on that a little bit more, I mean, thinking about technology now and kind of its growing role and importance in the industry, I mean, how will it continue to evolve and drive innovation in this market? I mean, what's next?
I mean, it's technology is moving. Every day it's moving. Right? I mean, that is the reason why, going back to our conversation where we said, a third-party company or companies that are focused on technology, not for the sake of technology, but for the sake of helping the transportation industry as a whole, are the ones that are driving this innovation today. And, so far what we have seen is people adopting to smartphones has been the biggest change, in what we do. The next wave is coming in the form of adopting to data and machine learning, artificial intelligence. You box everything into the so-called smart decisions, right? So you go from adding data and smart decisions. They go hand in hand, because without the data, you can't have smart decisions being made. That is the biggest revolution that we're going to see in the next wave. And, give you an example on that. When you have a carrier going into, let's say the carrier is in Chicago and has options to go into Atlanta or Dallas, looking ahead and seeing going into Atlanta is far more better than going into Dallas. Giving that level of, it's almost like looking forward. We call these as better reloads. So when carriers look for freight, we are helping them look beyond their immediate freight. Obviously, this is all in the private network, right? So this is not bombarded into the whole public market. As Geoff said earlier, carriers would love to keep their choices to a handful of trusted parties. But if you can add intelligence and look ahead, that tells them, I want to go to Atlanta, not Dallas, because I have a better chance of making more money. It's almost consistent with playing golf. Every shot you hit in golf should set you up for a better shot. So that's the same concept that these carriers need. That's the same thing that large carriers does today. It's just that the small carriers didn't have that level of data or technology. Today, they have that. So they already got that. This is a big revolution that is happening today. The second one is connected systems, where we have an app for that. We have an app for that. I'm just using app because we're talking about micro carriers. So they rely on mobile technology more than desktop technology. So the connectivity between these systems is very, very important. We're going to see kind of a merger of apps. They're not going to be a million apps doing million things. We will have less number of apps doing more things, or aggregators in some sense, to eliminate the friction point between these apps. That's going to be a huge advantage again for productivity. Then the third part is making automated decisions, going back into the first one where we said decisions, but relying less on the human to do those decisions. I'll give you an analogy here. If you're driving a car, if you go out to buy a car today, it comes with a lot of these sensors out, right? If you're shifting lane and there's a car behind, in your blind spot, there is a sensor for that. But today, the car will even stop you from shifting lanes. So that's taking one step ahead. It's almost like protecting you, right? Making your decisions as needed. We're going to get into the stage of that. Basically, a parallel comparison would be if a trucker is running behind on the first load, alerting all the parties and making sure alerting the parties is one thing. There are contingency plans. for all these delays is important. Finding another carriers to move the other loads, taking care of the business, right, in an automated way is where the most of the development is going to happen. That's, we're pretty excited to see all of this in our lifetime.
Yeah, and a lot of great, innovations taking place. I love the golf analogy in terms of, each stroke, setting you up for, for the next one. And I think, going back to what Geoff said earlier, I think a lot of where these technologies are coming from is trying to level the playing field, if you will, between the micro carriers and the very large carriers, and really providing that seamless experience, if you will, for shippers and brokers alike, right? So I think, that's going to become something that's going to drive benefits to everyone, involved in the industry. We're running short on time here, so I'm just going to go right to my last question. So Geoff, maybe you'll answer first, and Prasad, you can, provide your thoughts on it. I mean, as a way to wrap up, I mean, when it comes to building a reliable and sustainable, capacity, network, I mean, what is the biggest lesson learned from your experience?
That's a great question. I think, I think figuring out what is mutually beneficial for all the parties. And again, I think the carriers want good quality freight that they can haul, and they want to be able to do what they're good at, and that is get to point A to point B. And I think the more that we use these technologies, we're able to just make that process that much more seamless for them. And to go back to just real quick on, like, for example, Prasad mentioned detention. I think as an industry, the brokerage industry has over the years sort of insulated the carriers and the shippers from true detention. And I think, as we evolve carriers to adapt this technology, it's a much easier conversation to have with a shipper, that says, yeah, he was there or wasn't there. But I think as we continue to think about what is the best experience for all the parties, bolting on this really, it's pretty, Prasad would probably argue it, but it's sort of simple technology, what we're trying to put in here. And it just makes it easier for everybody to have a very good experience in the transaction. And I think as a freight broker and a 3PL, I think that's very important to me, that my shippers get a win and my carriers get a win. And finding that balance is the important thing, and technology is helping us do that.
I love that. That phrase. I mean, there's a lot of conversation today about, companies competing on customer experience, particularly in supply chain. And I think this is yet another example here where, competing on experience, but here, particularly as a broker, you're competing on experience from two fronts, the carrier experience and the shipper experience. And right. So part of it is really, how do you balance, those two things so that the experience is mutually, pleasing, if you will, and mutually beneficial.
And unfortunately, over the years, sometimes the carrier's gotten forgotten about.
Absolutely. Prasad, your thoughts, wrapping up the conversation, your thoughts on some lessons learned in this area.
I would say, first of all, I like the way Geoff said, simple technology, referring to also, I like that.
probably a lot more code than that, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you feel, it's simple to use. So, thanks for saying that. Appreciate it. So I think it is, micro carriers are the backbone of this industry. Emphasizing on that is very, very important. Two, their size is also big, right? I mean, they move about, they do 80% of the work. And they take the imbalances of our market. Without them, it's like driving a car without shock absorbers. So we need to understand the intensity of this group, first of all, and put focus on them, because they are the ones that help really build the value in this space. And this is a group that's tech savvy, they're smart, they know what they're doing. It's not like they, so having those conversations with them in that sense is very important. they want to use technology. So, asking them what's more important for them. In some sense, taking care of these small carriers is the most important thing. Whether you're a 3PL, a shipper, or a broker, whatever role you're playing, if you put the truck before the freight and take care of the health of the truck, or the health of the owner operator of the small carrier. When I say health, I mean the business health. It really translates into success for everyone involved in it. When the carrier is making money, is successful doing what they do, everybody is successful in that supply chain. We're a connected supply chain. We're not going to be separated. And so, we see technology as a big leverage. It's not an unnecessary headache. For most part, people look at technology as, I don't want to deal with it. But in this current phase of transportation, technology is playing a very important role. It's playing a huge game changer. So understanding that, not saying that, we're going to deal with it when the time comes, is not an option, if anything. If you're a broker or a 3PL or a carrier out there, understand that most of these small carriers have already adopted to technology. They're expecting you to come back. So I go back to your very first question that you asked me. Are these people adopting to technology, right? They have adopted to technology far more than us sitting in the offices today. So they have changed the game. So it's up to us now to follow that trend and see where these guys are. We have to adapt to that technology that they are comfortable with. Because if they're not comfortable, then you're pushing the technology onto them, which they don't want to do. And the picture that comes to my mind is, if you have a CPA, you have two CPAs, one with paper and a pen, another one with a computer. The one with a computer has the scale. So technology plays a huge role in that. It's not that computers are smarter than us, but they can do a lot of things better than us in a short time. And that's why we need them. The technology is needed. It's not a unnecessary thing. From where we are standing, the future looks absolutely bright. We're going through a round of innovation. The people who are really innovators, adapt to the new trends, who are driven, are the ones they're finding ways to get to the next level. They are setting the standard for everyone to follow. It's almost like transportation has taken a rebirth in the last few years, and it's going through this innovation now. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, great points by both of you. I think, going back to my opening comment, one of the great lessons learned of 2018 was that there's got to be a better way, to the way we've traditionally done things in order to be able to successfully respond to all these, ongoing challenges in the industry, whether they're more stringent, customer requirements in terms of, more deliveries, shorter delivery windows, on-time requirements and so forth. Those are the rules that, shippers and consignees are putting out there in the market. So, carriers of all sizes are going to have to be able to respond to that, effectively to, grow and get the business and so forth. And this is where technology, as we've mentioned, throughout the program here, helps level the playing field and make that possible. So again, I want to thank both of you for, making the time to share your insights and advice on this topic today. And certainly, we covered a lot of ground, but, hopefully we got the wheels turning in people's minds in terms of what actions they can take to be, continue to be successful moving forward. So again, Geoff, Prasad, thank you for being with us.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Geoff.
Thank you.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Trucker Tools website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question for Geoff or Prasad, you can post it there, and I'm sure they'll be happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.